It was late November when this happened. I was 19 years old, home from college for Thanksgiving break, staying at my parents' house in upstate New York. They live in a quiet neighborhood surrounded by woods, about a 20-minute drive from the nearest town. It's the kind of place where the nights are absolutely silent, you can hear the wind move through the trees, and if something breaks that silence, it's immediately noticeable. My parents had gone out of town for a weekend trip to visit my aunt in Vermont, leaving me to watch the house. I didn't mind at all, I was used to being alone, and honestly, I was looking forward to some peace. My plan was simple: binge a few movies, eat whatever I wanted, and maybe invite a friend over the next day. The first night alone started completely normal. I made myself dinner, watched a few episodes of a show, and by around midnight, I was heading to bed. The house creaked now and then, the way old houses do when the temperature drops, but it didn't bother me. I'd grown up there. At around 2 in the morning, though, I woke up suddenly. It wasn't because of a dream or anything, I'd heard something. At first, I wasn't sure if it was real or part of my half-asleep state. It sounded like knocking. 3 slow knocks. Not loud, not urgent, but distinct. Knock, knock, knock. I lay there for a second, staring into the dark room. The sound seemed to come from the wall to my left, the one that faced the hallway. I sat up and listened. Nothing. Just silence again. I remember feeling that weird heaviness in my chest, the kind that comes when you're trying to convince yourself it was nothing, but deep down, you know you really heard it. After a few minutes of silence, I decided to ignore it. I turned over, pulled the blanket up, and eventually drifted back to sleep. The next morning, everything seemed normal. Sunlight was coming through the blinds, and the whole thing from last night already felt like a dream. I made coffee, walked around the house, and checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. I even laughed to myself about it, thinking maybe a branch hit the side of the house, or maybe a squirrel had gotten into the wall. We had issues with mice before, so the idea of something small moving around inside the walls didn't seem crazy. That night, I decided to stay up late again. I was on my laptop in the living room, watching YouTube videos, when it happened again. It was around 1:30 this time. Knock, knock, knock. It came from the same direction, like it was coming from inside the wall. But this time, it wasn't the same wall as before. I froze, staring at the wall next to the TV. It was the opposite side of the room from where I'd heard it the night before. I turned off the TV, so the room went completely silent. For maybe 30 seconds, I just stood there, listening. And then, again, 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. It didn't sound like pipes or the normal house settling noises. It was too deliberate. Too slow. Like someone trying to get my attention. My stomach twisted. I got up and pressed my ear to the wall. I could hear faint creaking, almost like someone was shifting their weight on the other side. I stepped back, heart pounding. Now, I knew for a fact that no one was supposed to be in the house but me. All the doors were locked, and there's no basement access from outside. I grabbed a flashlight and walked the house from end to end, checking every room, every closet, every window latch. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No open windows. Everything was completely normal. I tried to rationalize it again, maybe it was some weird sound traveling through the walls from the plumbing. But then I realized the heat wasn't even on. The house was quiet enough that I could hear my own breathing. Eventually, I went to bed, but I didn't really sleep that night. Every creak made me open my eyes. Every gust of wind against the house made me tense up. Nothing else happened for the rest of the night, but I was on edge until sunrise. The next morning, I called my dad. I told him about the noises, half expecting him to tell me it was something with the pipes or animals in the walls. But instead, he got really quiet on the phone. After a moment, he said, "You're sure it was knocking?" "Yeah," I told him. 3 knocks, slow, and it's happened both nights. He didn't say anything for a bit. Then he sighed and said, "We've heard that before." That made my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" He explained that about a year earlier, before I went off to college, they'd been hearing similar noises, slow knocks from different parts of the house. Always late at night. They even called an exterminator, thinking it might be animals in the walls, but the guy never found anything. The weird part, my dad said, is that it always seemed to happen when one of us was alone. Your mom heard it when I was gone for work. I heard it when she was visiting your aunt. I didn't like that answer. I didn't like it at all. He tried to downplay it after that, saying maybe it was the wood expanding or something, but I could tell he didn't believe it either. He just didn't want me to worry. That night, I decided to test something. I moved my phone camera to face the hallway and hit record before I went to bed. I figured if I caught the sound, I'd be able to show my parents, or at least confirm to myself that I wasn't imagining things. It was a little after 2 when I woke up again. This time, I didn't hear knocking. I heard footsteps. Soft, slow, deliberate footsteps. They were coming from the hallway, right outside my door. The floorboards in that part of the house creak when you step on them, and that's exactly what I was hearing. One step. Then another. Then silence. I didn't move. I just stared at the bottom gap of my bedroom door, waiting to see if a shadow passed by. But there was nothing. Just darkness and silence. After what felt like 5 straight minutes, I got up the courage to whisper, "Hello." No answer. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app. It was still recording. I pointed the light toward the door, slowly got out of bed, and walked closer. My hand was shaking as I reached for the doorknob. When I opened it, the hallway was empty. I checked every room again, nothing. I even checked the locks again. Everything was still secure. The house was completely still, yet I felt that weird sensation like I wasn't alone. It's hard to explain. It's like when you know someone's staring at you, even if you can't see them. I went back to my room, locked the door, and stayed up the rest of the night watching that recording. Around 2 minutes before I woke up, I heard it. 3 faint knocks. And then, what sounded like slow footsteps moving past the camera. I couldn't see anything, but the sound was crystal clear. The next day, I told my friend Sam about it. He's the kind of guy who doesn't scare easily, so when I said I wanted him to come stay the night and see for himself, he agreed right away. We spent the first part of the night playing games, talking, and trying to laugh it off. I could tell he thought I was exaggerating. Around midnight, he said, "Man, it's just an old house. It's gonna make noises." But at around 2 again, it started. The knocking. 3 times. Slow and deliberate. Sam's smile disappeared. He turned to me and said, "You heard that too, right?" Before I could answer, it happened again, this time from the opposite wall. We stood there frozen, listening. Then Sam whispered, "That's not normal, dude." We both grabbed flashlights and searched the house. Again, nothing. No animals, no signs of anyone else there. We even went outside in the cold and walked around the house, shining lights along the siding. There was nothing, no marks, no holes, no branches hitting the house. But as we were standing outside, the sound came again, from inside the house. 3 slow knocks. Coming from my bedroom wall. That's when Sam's face went pale. "I think you should stay with me tonight," he said. We locked up and left. We didn't even turn off the lights. The next morning, I went back to grab a few things. The house felt wrong, quiet, but heavy somehow. When I went into my room, I noticed something that made my heart drop. On the wall where I'd heard the knocks, right next to the electrical outlet, there were faint marks. 3 small dents, perfectly spaced apart. Like someone had been knocking from inside the wall. I stared at them for a long time, trying to process what I was seeing. The plaster was slightly cracked around the edges, and it looked recent, like it hadn't been there before. When my parents came back 2 days later, I showed them. My dad's face went pale when he saw it. He didn't say much, just ran his hand along the wall and muttered, "That's new." That night, he stayed up with me in the living room. Around 1:30, we both heard it again, 3 knocks, this time from the hallway wall. My dad stood up, grabbed a flashlight, and banged on the wall in return. Nothing. Then he said something I'll never forget. He whispered, "It always happens in threes." I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head and said, "We need to get someone to check this place out." Over the next week, my dad had a contractor come inspect the walls. They cut open a section of drywall where the knocking had been loudest, thinking maybe a pipe or animal was trapped in there. When they opened it up, there was nothing inside. No wiring issues, no rodents, nothing. Just insulation and dust. But the weird part? The inside of the drywall had marks. 3 indents. From the inside. The contractor couldn't explain it. He just said, maybe pressure or settling caused it, though he didn't sound convinced. My parents didn't talk about it after that. They patched up the wall and left it alone. The knocking stopped for a while after that, at least when all 3 of us were home. It wasn't until a few months later that something new happened. I was back at college when my mom called me one evening. She sounded shaken. She said she was home alone, my dad was working late, and she'd heard something in the kitchen. When she went to check, one of the chairs had been pulled away from the table. She said it wasn't like that earlier. And while she was standing there staring at it, she heard 3 slow knocks, coming from the wall behind her. That's when I knew whatever it wasn't gone. When I came home that summer, I decided I needed to find out what was going on. I started asking questions around the neighborhood, mostly older folks who'd lived there longer than us. That's when I learned something strange. Apparently, the house used to belong to an older man named Harris. He'd lived there alone for decades, and people described him as quiet but odd. He rarely left the house, and after his wife passed away, he pretty much kept to himself. One night, back in the late 90s, he disappeared. The police searched but never found him. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of foul play. He was just gone. According to one of the neighbors, the only weird thing was that his house, our house, had been locked from the inside when the police got there. They had to break the door down to get in. The only thing out of place was a small hole in the wall in his bedroom, patched over from the inside. I didn't know what to do with that information. I told my parents, and my mom begged me not to dig any deeper. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went up to the attic one evening, hoping maybe I'd find something, old boxes, letters, anything that could explain what was happening. The attic was mostly empty, except for a few old boards and insulation. I was about to leave when I noticed something strange, a square patch on the far wall that looked newer than the rest. Like someone had replaced a section of wood paneling. I grabbed a small hammer and gently pried it loose. Behind it was a hollow space. Inside that space was a small, rusted metal box. I pulled it out carefully and opened it. Inside were a few things, an old photo of a man and woman, a folded piece of paper, and a ring. The photo was faded, but the man looked like the one I'd seen in an old newspaper photo of Harris. The woman must have been his wife. I unfolded the paper, and my heart started racing as I read the words, written in shaky handwriting, "I hear her knocking again. She won't stop. I tried sealing the walls, but she still finds me. 3 knocks every night. I think she wants me to join her." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The paper was yellowed and brittle, but the ink was still dark enough to read clearly. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every sound made me tense up. Around 2 in the morning, I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. But this time, it wasn't coming from the wall. It was coming from inside the closet. I froze, staring at the door. The sound came again, louder now. Knock, knock, knock. The closet door handle started to move, just slightly, like someone was testing it from the other side. I jumped out of bed and ran out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I didn't go back in until the morning. When I finally opened that closet, there was nothing there. But the wall behind it, the same one that faced the hallway, had 3 new dents. After that, I refused to stay in that room again. My parents eventually moved out the following year, saying the house felt too heavy. I didn't argue. The new family who bought it renovated most of it, but I've heard from a neighbor that the woman who lives there now has complained about strange noises. She told them she sometimes hears knocking inside the walls, always 3 times, around 2 in the morning. Even now, years later, I still have dreams about that house. In the dreams, I'm standing in my old bedroom, and I can hear it again. 3 slow knocks from behind the wall. And then a voice, whispering so faintly I can barely make it out. It always says the same thing, "Let me in." I used to think nothing could really scare me when I was home alone. I grew up in a small town in northern Oregon, where nothing ever really happened, no crime, no weird neighbors, no urban legends. My family's house was on the edge of a forest preserve, a quiet 2-story home surrounded by pine trees and gravel roads. This story took place in 2017, when I was 21. My parents had gone on a week-long trip to visit my grandparents, and I was staying behind to take care of our dog, Milo, a lazy golden retriever who mostly slept near the fireplace. For the first few days, everything was peaceful. I worked from home during the day and spent my evenings watching movies or walking Milo through the woods near the property. It was cold, early November, and at night, fog rolled in thick enough that you could barely see your own mailbox from the porch. That fog, mixed with the quiet, made the nights feel hollow. You could hear everything, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of wood, and sometimes, if the wind was right, faint sounds from the forest. But on the 4th night, that quiet changed. It started with something small. I was sitting in the living room, reading on my tablet, when Milo suddenly lifted his head. His ears perked, and he gave a low growl, something I had never heard him do before. I looked up, expecting maybe a raccoon outside, but there was nothing. Just the reflection of the room's warm light against the big window that faced the backyard. Beyond that reflection, it was pitch black. "Milo, what is it?" I asked. He didn't look at me. His eyes were locked on the window, and his growl deepened. Then, as I stood up to look closer, he barked once, loud and sharp, before backing away, tail tucked. I froze. The sound had come from outside the window, I thought. A quick, almost metallic tap, like someone brushing their hand or fingernails against the glass. I turned off the lamp to cut the reflection and squinted into the dark yard. Nothing. Just fog and blackness. I stood there for almost a full minute, waiting for movement, but there was none. Finally, I turned the light back on and tried to calm my nerves. Maybe a branch hit the glass. Maybe a squirrel. But the sound had been deliberate, too clean, too close. That night, I double-checked the locks. Every window, every door. I even made sure the garage door was latched tight. Then I went upstairs to bed with Milo following right behind me, curling up near the foot of the bed like usual. At around 2:40 a.m., I woke up. Milo was standing at the bedroom door, staring toward the hallway. He wasn't barking this time, just standing there, tail low, ears perked forward. "Milo?" I whispered. He didn't look back. Then I heard it too. Footsteps. Not heavy or loud, just slow, dragging ones. The kind someone would make walking barefoot across the wood floors downstairs. I sat up straight in bed, every muscle in my body tensing. It wasn't the house settling. It wasn't the wind. It was footsteps, steady, human, and deliberate. I reached for my phone. It was 2:43 a.m. I opened the camera app, set it to record, and crept toward the door. The sound stopped. I waited, holding my breath. Then came a faint creak from below, the sound of the back door handle being tested. Just a soft click, 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 like someone slowly twisting it back and forth. Milo started growling again. I whispered, "Stay," then grabbed my baseball bat from the corner. My heart was pounding so hard it made my vision blur. I inched down the stairs, trying not to make the floor creak. When I reached the bottom, I scanned the dark living room. The only light came from the oven clock in the kitchen, a faint green glow. Everything looked normal. Then came the tap. Same sound as before. Metal or nails brushing lightly against the window glass. This time, I saw movement. Just for a split second, a shape, darker than the night itself, standing right outside the big living room window. It wasn't pressed against the glass, it was standing a few feet back. But I could see enough to tell it was a person. Tall, still, facing directly toward me. I froze, gripping the bat so tight my hands hurt. Then the figure moved, it leaned closer, just slightly, enough for the light from inside to catch on something pale. A face. A white face, expressionless, eyes black in the dimness, watching through the glass. I stumbled backward, tripping over the edge of the carpet. Milo barked wildly, charging toward the window. The figure didn't flinch, it just stood there. Then, slowly, it stepped back into the fog until it was gone. I called the police immediately. They arrived about 15 minutes later, but by then, the fog was so thick they couldn't see more than 10 feet in front of them. They searched the yard, the woods, even the sides of the house. No footprints, no signs of anyone. One of the officers said, "Probably a prank." "You sure it wasn't your reflection?" I knew what I saw. And I knew the look in that face wasn't something human. After that night, I didn't sleep much. I left all the lights on downstairs, and I made sure Milo stayed close. 2 nights later, though, it happened again, but worse. I was upstairs, scrolling on my phone in bed, when I heard tapping again. Not downstairs this time, right outside my window. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor. The sound came in slow bursts, 3 taps, then silence. Another 3, then silence again. Milo went rigid. He started whining, pacing near the window. I couldn't bring myself to look at first. I just stared at the curtains, frozen. Then, with a shaking hand, I reached over and pulled them open. There was nothing there. Just the same thick fog outside. I almost laughed in relief, until I realized the tapping hadn't stopped. It was coming from the wall beside the window. 3 slow knocks, spaced evenly apart. It felt like déjà vu, like the knocking was coming from inside the wall itself, just like in those stories you hear online. I backed away, grabbed my phone, and called my dad. He didn't answer. Then I called my friend Jake, who lived 10 minutes away. He picked up groggily. "Dude, it's like 3 in the morning." I said, "Jake, someone's outside my house." He didn't even hesitate. "I'm on my way." When Jake got there, we went outside together, flashlights, baseball bats, everything. We found something this time. Near the living room window where I'd first seen the face, there were footprints in the damp dirt, bare footprints. No shoes. The prints led around the side of the house, then disappeared into the forest. We followed them for a few feet, but the fog was too thick, and the air felt wrong. Like the woods were watching us. We went back inside, locked everything, and stayed up until sunrise. Neither of us said much, but I could tell Jake was shaken. He kept glancing toward the window every few minutes, like he expected the face to appear again. The next morning, we found something else. On the kitchen window, written faintly in condensation, were 3 words, "Let me in." I remember standing there, staring at the letters as they slowly faded. The glass was cold to the touch, but the words looked like they'd been written from inside, not outside. That's when I called my parents again. They told me to leave the house and stay at Jake's until they got back. So I did. But curiosity got the better of me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something about that house, or the woods around it, wasn't right. 2 days later, I went back in daylight. The air was crisp, the fog gone. Everything looked perfectly normal. I walked around the house, checking for damage or signs of entry. That's when I noticed something near the tree line. A small wooden structure, half buried under pine needles and moss. It looked like an old shed, maybe 6 feet tall, built from rough boards. The door was hanging slightly open, and inside, I could see shelves with what looked like jars or bottles. I hesitated, then stepped closer. The smell hit first, damp, metallic, and foul, like rust and rot mixed. Inside, the walls were covered in old newspaper clippings, some so faded you could barely read them. I recognized one headline: "Local man found dead after disappearance, family reports strange incidents in woods." Another article mentioned a man who had been found in his cabin decades earlier, windows sealed shut, all doors locked from the inside. The neighbors claimed he used to talk about the face that watches through glass. I backed out of the shed, my heart racing. When I turned around, I could have sworn I saw movement, something pale slipping between the trees. I left right then and there. That night, even at Jake's place, I couldn't sleep. Around 2:30, I woke up suddenly. His room was dark, but the window blinds glowed faintly from a streetlight outside. And in that dim light, there was a shape. A figure standing just beyond the glass. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The shape was still, completely still, but it had that same silhouette. Tall, thin, head tilted slightly to one side. Then came the faintest tap on the glass. Milo started barking from the living room downstairs, going absolutely insane. Jake sat up, confused, and by the time we looked again, the figure was gone. We ran outside immediately, but the street was empty. No one there, no cars passing by. Just that same, thick silence I'd come to dread. After that, things escalated. Even during the day, I felt watched. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the corner of my vision, like someone ducking behind a tree when I turned my head. When my parents finally came back, I told them everything. They didn't believe the supernatural parts, of course, they thought maybe someone had been stalking the house. My dad set up cameras around the property, motion lights, sensors, everything. For about a week, it was quiet. No tapping, no fog, no faces. Then one morning, when we checked the footage, there was a clip that made us all go silent. It was from the camera facing the backyard, time-stamped 2:39 a.m. In the video, fog rolls slowly across the yard. Then, faintly, a figure walks into frame. It's a tall person, moving slowly, barefoot, wearing what looks like a pale, torn shirt. The person stops right at the window, just standing there, facing the camera. But the most horrifying part wasn't that they were there. It was the face. Even through the low light, you could see it was wrong, unnaturally pale, eyes sunken and dark, mouth slightly open like a doll's. Then, the figure leans closer to the glass until the camera goes fuzzy, static bursts across the screen, and when it clears again, the figure is gone. The timestamp jumps 3 minutes forward. My dad called the police again, and this time they took it seriously. They did another sweep, checked the woods, and even brought a K9 unit. But there was no trace, no footprints, no scent trail, nothing. They suggested maybe it was an intruder who knew how to avoid detection. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. A few nights later, it happened again, but for the last time. I was in my room, wide awake at 2 a.m., scrolling through my phone. The house was silent, my parents asleep. Then, without warning, the power flickered. The lights dimmed, then went out completely. The room went pitch black except for the faint moonlight through the blinds. And then, 3 knocks. Right on my window. I froze, staring at the glass. My phone screen reflected my face, and behind it, another one. A pale reflection, white eyes staring back at me from outside. I dropped the phone and stumbled backward, heart racing so fast I couldn't breathe. Then came another knock, louder this time, right above where I had been standing. Milo barked from downstairs, the sound echoing through the house. My dad burst into the hallway, flashlight in hand, yelling, "What's happening?" We ran outside together, but again, nothing. No footprints, no person, no sign of entry. Just cold fog rolling across the yard. When we came back in, my mom pointed to something on the floor by the back door. A wet handprint. It was smeared slightly, like whoever, or whatever, had made it had dragged their fingers along the wood. We never got an explanation. A month later, my parents sold the house. The new owners remodeled it, new siding, new windows, new everything. But a few months after they moved in, my mom got an email from the realtor. Apparently, the new owners wanted to break their lease early. They said strange things had been happening, footsteps at night, knocks on the windows, voices outside. And one morning, they found muddy footprints inside the living room. Barefoot prints. Leading to the big window facing the yard. It's been years since then, but I still dream about that face. Sometimes, when I wake up at night and glance toward my own window, I swear I see the faintest reflection of something pale standing just outside. And every time, just before I look away, I think I hear it again, 3 slow taps on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. When the night gets quiet, and every sound seems too close. Just remember, sometimes the scariest stories aren't made up. They happen when we're alone. Which story scared you the most? Comment below, and subscribe for more true horror stories.